The wind carried the smell of winter sage across the high plains as Cole Maddox rode beneath a sky the color of cold steel. 10 years. 10 winters since he last saw her face, since he last held the life he walked away from. Snow clung to the cuffs of his coat as his horse pushed through the deep drifts. The mountains watched him like silent judges, their jagged ridges sharp against the stark morning light. Cole kept his gaze fixed on the valley ahead, Willow Bend, the town he once promised he'd grow old in. Promises, he hadn't kept many. 10 years ago, he rode away a broken man young, convinced he had nothing to offer her, carrying a shame he refused to speak aloud. He told Alara James he'd return when he was a man worth loving. But worth came slow to men like Cole. The world carved him deeper than he ever expected. Storms, gun smoke, cold nights on the trail. Now he was back, aged in ways that didn't show on the surface. And he didn't know if she'd even want to see him. The town came into view at the base of the hills, a handful of buildings huddled against the wind. Willow Bend had always been small, but Cole felt smaller as his horse clopped onto the familiar main street. Folks moved about with morning chores. Until they noticed him, they recognized him. They just weren't sure if they should. A few nodded. Many didn't. Cole didn't blame them. Men who vanish for a decade don't come home to applause. He tied his horse near the general store, trying to steady the quiet pounding in his chest. He rehearsed the words he'd say to her. I'm sorry, I should have stayed. I never stopped loving you, but every sentence felt too small, too hollow for the chasm of 10 years. Cole turned, and then the breath left him. She was there. Alara stepped out of the mercantile, a basket under one arm, the morning light catching the auburn in her hair. She looked older, not tired, just lived in, like the years had shaped her gently. The same warm eyes, the same calm grace, but with something new. Something steadier, stronger. Her gaze lifted and froze on him. The basket nearly slipped from her hands. Cole, she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. He tipped his hat a motion slower and rougher than he intended. Evenin', Alara, his voice cracked like old wood. For a long, frozen moment, neither of them spoke. The whole street seemed to dim around them, leaving just two souls stumbling through the shock of time. Finally, she stepped forward, her breath shaking. 10 years, Cole, I. And then a small voice echoed from behind her. Ma, you okay? Cole looked down. A boy maybe 9, maybe 10 jogged up to her side. His cheeks were red from the cold, his hair dark as midnight. But it was the eyes that stopped Cole's heartbeat. Steel gray, his eyes. Cole felt the ground slip away beneath him. Alara's hand gently touched the boy's shoulder. Sweetheart, go inside for a moment. I'll be right there. But, Ma, go on, she whispered softly. The boy obeyed, stepping inside the mercantile, completely unaware that his very existence had just cracked a grown man's soul wide open. Cole swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. Alara, that boy. She took a slow, deliberate breath, her voice trembling with the truth she could no longer hide. His name is Jonah. The name hit him like a bullet, a gentle one, but a bullet still. Alara, he whispered, pain and longing tangled in every syllable, is he? Her eyes glossed with tears she fought to keep from falling. Yes, Cole, he's yours. The cold wind went silent. The mountains seemed to lean in, listening. Cole lifted a hand to the side of his face as if steadying himself against the force of the revelation. 10 winters of wandering, 10 winters of craving a purpose. And his son had been here the whole time, growing, laughing, living, needing a father he never knew he had. Alara, why didn't you send word? Why didn't you tell me? His voice was strained with a decade of lost time. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks, glistening in the cold air. Because the day you left, you said you'd come back when the world made you whole. But days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to years. I didn't know if you were alive or buried beneath some nameless sky. I wasn't going to raise him waiting on a ghost. Cole staggered back a step, the breath shallow in his lungs. He had no anger for her, only a regret so profound it burned deep in his chest. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. She shook her head softly, her expression a storm of old love and new reality. "Love isn't the question anymore. The question is what you do now." Before he could answer, before he could even process the weight of her words, a shout tore across the street. "Sheriff! Sheriff! Come quick! The James Ranch is under attack!" Alara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she clutched the edge of the doorway. Cole's instincts, honed by a decade of survival, flared instantly. He grabbed her arm. "Who's at your ranch?" Her voice broke, filled with pure terror. "Jonah." The world snapped into motion. Cole rode like the wind was chasing him, snow breaking beneath his horse's hooves as the James Ranch finally came into view through the white haze. His chest clenched tight, smoke curled from the barn roof, windows were shattered, and a wagon lay overturned near the corral. This was a scene of pure chaos, and somewhere in the middle of it was a boy with his eyes. He jumped from his horse before it even fully stopped, boots hitting the ground, running toward the porch. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked through the frigid air. Cole ducked instinctively behind a thick porch post, his own revolver already in his hand as he scanned the yard. A flicker of movement near the barn doors. A man in a black coat fired again, the bullet splintering wood just inches from Cole's head. Cole didn't hesitate. He returned fire, his shot finding the man's shoulder. The outlaw grunted, collapsing into the snow. Cole sprinted past him, kicking the man's gun away. "Where's the boy?" he demanded, his voice slow and dangerous. The outlaw grimaced, clutching his bleeding arm. "Inside. With the others." Cole didn't wait for another word. He slammed the barn doors open, the warm, dusty smell of hay mixing with the acrid scent of smoke. His eyes adjusted to the dim light just in time to see two more armed men standing near the hayloft ladder, and behind them, tied with rope around his wrists, stood Jonah. The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly, fear shaking his small frame, but he held his chin high, trying to be braver than his years. Cole's heart twisted. He remembered being that young, that scared, and pretending he wasn't. One of the outlaws turned, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. "Well, look who we got, the prodigal cowboy." The weight of the years he'd been gone pressed down on Cole, but right now, none of that mattered. Only Jonah. "Let the boy go," Cole said, his voice steady despite the hammer of his own pulse. The second outlaw aimed his gun directly at Jonah. "Not until his mother pays what she owes." Cole raised both his hands slowly, a universal sign of surrender. "This isn't the way," he said, his voice calm. "Take me instead." Jonah's eyes widened at those words. Cole forced himself not to look at the boy, afraid his resolve might crack. "You want leverage. I've got more value than a kid." The outlaws exchanged a quick, greedy glance. It was a language men with nothing to lose understood all too well. One of them nodded. "Fine, come here slow." Cole moved forward, each step heavy with dread. He timed it perfectly. As he got close enough, he dropped low, sweeping a broken shovel handle across the outlaw's legs. The man went down hard. Cole lunged for the fallen gun, firing once at the second outlaw. The shot hit his wrist, sending his weapon flying. The barn erupted in screams and the echo of gunfire. Jonah scrambled behind a bale of hay as the first outlaw, now recovered, charged Cole with a knife. They slammed into a stall wall, straw flying everywhere. Cole fought with a desperate strength, his winter-worn muscles straining. The knife glinted, inches from his ribs. Then, a small voice cut through the chaos. "Stop hurting him," Jonah cried out. That brief moment of distraction was all Cole needed. He wrenched the outlaw's arm, sending the knife skidding across the floor. A punch, a second, the man dropped, unconscious. The barn fell silent, filled only by the sound of Cole's ragged breathing. He turned to Jonah, whose wide eyes were filled with fear and something deeper. Something familiar. Cole's hands trembled as he cut the ropes from the boy's wrists. Jonah looked up at him, studying his face the way a child studies a stranger they feel an unexplainable connection to. Cole swallowed hard, You're safe now, he whispered. Jonah hesitated, his voice small. Who are you? The question hit Cole harder than any bullet ever could. Before he could find the words to answer, horses thundered outside. Alara burst through the barn doors, the sheriff and 2 deputies right behind her. She ran straight to Jonah, pulling him into her arms, her tears soaking his hair. Cole instinctively stepped back, suddenly an outsider in his own story. The sheriff surveyed the scene, taking in the 3 subdued outlaws. Looks like you handled things before we got here. He motioned for his deputies to cuff the men. Cole thus nodded silently, but Alara's eyes were locked on him. She held Jonah close, but her voice trembled when she spoke. You didn't have to risk your life like that. Cole looked from her to the boy, then back to her. I did, he said quietly. More than you know. Jonah peeked out from his mother's embrace, staring at Cole again with a strange mix of gratitude and raw curiosity. Mama, he whispered, he saved me. Alara's breath hitched. For a fleeting second, something unspoken passed between them, an old love colliding with a new, undeniable truth, a decade of silence finally cracking open. The sheriff approached Cole. We'll need your statements. You can come to the office now. Or in the morning, if you need some time. Cole's gaze drifted to the mountains, now dark silhouettes against the fading light. Tomorrow, he said softly. Alara took a small step toward him, her hand tightening protectively on Jonah's shoulder. Cole, don't leave again. Not tonight. The words froze him in place. 10 winters of emptiness, and suddenly one single evening held more meaning than all the lost years combined. He looked at Jonah one last time. The boy's steel-gray eyes didn't look away. Cole felt something shift deep inside him, like a door unlocking in a quiet room long thought abandoned. I'll stay, he said. But as snow began to fall softly over the ranch, a new question settled, heavy in the cold air, one neither of them dared to ask yet. What would tomorrow bring for a man who'd returned too late, and a child who never knew he needed him? The night settled over the ranch like a soft blanket, quiet except for the muted crackle of the fireplace inside Alara's small cabin. Cole stood near the doorway, unsure if he deserved to step any farther into the life he'd once walked away from. Jonah sat at the table with a blanket around his shoulders, sipping warm milk. Alara brushed soot from his hair, her touch gentle, her face pale from the long day. Cole watched them, the warmth of the fire pulling at memories he had run from for far too long. Jonah's eyes flicked toward him again, curious, guarded, thoughtful. Cole tried to smile, but it came out uncertain. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a canyon, unsure how wide the jump truly was. Alara finally spoke, breaking the fragile silence. He hasn't asked yet, she said softly, glancing at Jonah. But he will. Cole swallowed. And what will you tell him? She hesitated, turning her eyes to the flames. The truth. But I wanted to hear yours first. Cole's breath shook as he stepped closer. I never meant to leave for good. You know that, she nodded, though her eyes were wet. I waited, Cole, I waited far longer than pride should have allowed. His voice grew thick. I should have come back sooner. I know that too. Jonah looked between them, sensing more than he understood. Mama, he whispered. She kissed the top of his head. It's all right, sweetheart. Finish your milk. Cole's boots felt like lead as he moved to the table. He crouched so he was level with Jonah. You were brave today, he said. Jonah shrugged, but a small smile tugged at him. Mama says bravery is doing something even when you're scared. Cole's throat tightened. She taught you well. Jonah studied him again with that same quiet stare. Why did you save me? Cole felt the weight of a decade settle in his bones. Because. He looked at Alara, then back at the boy. Because some things you don't walk away from. Jonah blinked slow, like he was piecing something together. You look like me, he said softly. The room stilled. Cole felt his heart stop and start again all at once. Alara closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Jonah lifted his small hand and touched his own cheek, then gestured to Cole. Same eyes. Mama says my eyes came from someone who's gone. Cole's voice cracked before a single word left him. I'm not gone, he whispered. Jonah stared at him, waiting for more. Cole took a shaky breath. I should have been here, I should have stayed, but I'm here now, and if you want me to stay, I will. Jonah's lip trembled. Alara's hand slipped over her mouth. The boy hesitated only a moment before shuffling off the chair and stepping toward him. He stopped inches away and looked up. Are you my father? The world seemed to go quiet enough to hear the snow falling outside. Cole felt something inside him break open: regret, hope, love he never allowed himself to believe he deserved. Yes, he said, voice shaking, if you'll have me. Jonah's arms wrapped around him before the last word even finished. Cole pulled him in tight, holding him as though making up for every year he'd missed. Alara's soft sob broke into the room, full of relief and pain and something he hoped was forgiveness. When Jonah finally pulled back, he wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Will you stay forever? He asked. Cole brushed the boy's hair gently. For as long as you want me. The firelight glowed warm on Alara's face as she stepped closer. He's always wanted to know you, she said quietly, and I never stopped. Her voice drifted off, fragile with a truth she was still afraid to name. Cole took her hand, hesitant at first, then firm when she didn't pull away. I never stopped either. They stood together in the soft glow of the fire, a broken family finding its shape again. Outside, dawn slowly brightened the sky, painting the snow in shades of peach and rose. Cole looked out the window and felt for the first time in 10 long winters like the world was giving him another chance. Later that morning, Jonah bundled into his coat and ran outside to show Cole the horse Alara said would be his someday. Cole lifted him onto the saddle, steadying him with careful hands. Jonah laughed light, pure, and full of hope. Alara watched from the porch, her eyes shining with something tender and new. Cole walked beside Jonah as the boy led the horse through fresh snow. Every step felt like stitching together a life he thought he'd lost forever. Alara joined them, her hand brushing his as they walked. She didn't take it back. He didn't let go. Jonah's laughter echoed across the frosted fields. Drifting toward the mountains, Cole once rode to forget the life he'd left behind. Now, every sound reminded him why he'd returned. The sun climbed slowly, melting the long shadows of morning. Cole looked at the boy in the saddle and the woman beside him, and he felt the truth settle warm in his chest. Some winters don't end until you come home. And after 10 of them, he finally had.